here's a little update on what I'm thinking about the Nikon D750, and the point is that it's almost actually making me think about other camera manufacturers now. One camera manufacturer which I am impressed with is Sony at the moment. I haven't had their cameras, I haven't touched their cameras, but I like their strategy at the moment. At the moment they've got the Sony A7A, A7R, A7S, and they're all the same body, and they're all full frame sensors, but they all have different functions. So you've got your 24, your 36, and then your 12 megapixel one, which is amazing for video. And I think that's a good strategy. A lot of times there's this idea that people say, oh, Nikon doesn't want to make another D700 because the D700 cannibalized sales of the Nikon D3. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think a lot of times is that you'd have people that can't afford spending money on two D3s, which would have been that each one was about £4 grand, so that'd been £8 grand. But they could save another £2,000 and get a D700. And then if they did have the extra money, they'd probably be spending it on a lens. So I don't believe that the idea of if you bring a camera which has almost as good functions as the lower level, as the higher level cameras, that you necessarily lose sales to the higher levels. It's a bit like saying Ferrari's got the LaFerrari. Oh well, it's got a F430. No, F5 458. Oh, no one's going to buy the more expensive one. That doesn't make sense. Everyone still goes for that. Or for example, Range Rover saying, oh well, we've got the Land Rover. Why would anyone buy the Range Rover? It's almost as good. It's like, no, people go for what they need. And I think what this is the only thing which is stopping me from going to Sony is its lens ranges, and it's a bit bloody confusing at the moment as well. So with Sony, you've got an A mount and an E mount, and then you've got an A mount which is for this type of close range or something like that. So A mount was the original, I think, so that was for full frame cameras, and then there's the E mount which is for the APS-C cameras, and then you've got this which is like a micro, it's not micro four thirds, it's just a shorter distance, and it's a slightly different mount again. I have no idea which lenses to use. Somebody told me on Facebook. Hold on, I'll just check it. Yeah, so Franz gave me the advice here saying that, so it's actually an E-mount for the A7 series. However, it says there's an APS-C E-mount for the NEX series, a full-frame E-mount for the A7 and the A7R and A7S, an APC A-mount, which is A77, and full-frame A-mount, just like two bayonets and two sensor formats for each A-mount, being the digital SLR-like system, E-mount being the mirrorless, I think. Just like, okay, that's got confusing, and then I think there's not really compatibility with stuff like Tamron or Tokina or Sigma or stuff like that. And because like for me, I've been looking at the videos for the Sony and just the ability for video. Like for me, a lot of my work is video based, with the properties that I do, which is something with very low light, and the stuff which I'm seeing. I'll put a link to this. This is at b&hphotovideo.com. The specs here that they're showing you are just fantastic, and the dynamic range that you're getting in these sensors as well is looking good. And so I like how there's not a compromise on body. I think that's the main thing. You get the same body, but if you want super megapixels, you want 36 megapixels, that's fine, you only get 4 frames a second. If you want kind of in between, 24 megapixels, that's fine, you get 5 frames a second. If you want super high ISO, then you don't really care about number of pixels, then a 12 megapixel, still 5 frames a second, and there's different focusing and all of these kind of stuff. So it's like, brilliant. There's a lot of time for it, certainly wedding photographers, where what they'll need is maybe a high-resolution camera like the Nikon D810 for if they're doing the outside shot, the landscape shot, the group shots. But then they'll also need a camera for whenever they go indoors. Let's say it's a candle-lit ceremony inside a church somewhere, or a castle, which has terrible lighting. Then they may just kind of go, we don't need the super high resolution, but what we do need is to be able to expose this properly and get a high ISO ability. So there's the opportunity of having two separate cameras, but having the ability to just go from D810 to D810S, and like is not uncommon. Like there's other cameras which you got benefits within the camera. So way back in the day, you had the Nikon D2X, and the cool thing about this one is that you at the time, you had a 12 megapixel camera. Which could give you 5.3 frames a second, or you could crop it down. It wasn't even a cropping down, it was just like, or you could make it so it's only taking 7 megapixels, it got 8 frames a second. So it's saying it's like 2 cameras in one. So I thought, oh, that's pretty awesome. So I'd love it if you can get the Nikon D810 taking the full frame image, 36 megapixels, don't care, it's only 3 frames a second, fine. But if there's an option to go, look, can we just cut it down? I'm not talking about cropping off areas, but I just say, just give me less megapixels, bring it down to 18, 20, 24, whatever, but give me more frames a second, or if there's some way where you can boost the ISO performance, that would be like, oh, this is a double win. I don't need a second camera. So that would probably be cannibalizing sales, if you put 2 functions into one camera. If you just have it as 2 separate cameras, but you've got the same body, I think you would actually increase sales. So the other thing which I'm looking at just now is the the Canon 7D Mark II. This is kind of making me think, like I don't need full frame that much. Full frame doesn't actually necessarily help the work which I do. A lot of the stuff I do is wide angle shots, and with that you get pretty strong vignetting, you get distortion, you get crap around the edges, and like less resolution around the edges because it's so difficult to bend the light from such difficult angles. That's where something like a crop sensor camera, like what I've been using for the last while, the Canon 550D, you get pretty much everything you need. And what you also get is you get a greater depth of field, because to get the same field of view from a 16mm, you go to an 11mm. So therefore, 11mm at 2.8, you've got more depth of field than you do if you're at 16mm, same depth with same field of view on a full frame, but you have a shallower depth of field. So for a lot of my property work, I want to be able to see the full depth of the property. I don't want to think, oh, that chair just behind the table is blurry, than if it was like at 11mm. So sometimes actually crop sensor cameras can be a bit more beneficial. So looking at the Canon 7D Mark II, 10 frames a second, 20 megapixels, that's where I'm at. Great video functions. It's got 60 frames a second, 1080p, weather sealing. It's got built-in GPS. I don't know who uses that. I've never really figured that one out. It's saying it's got a high dynamic range HDR mode in it. I've looked at Tony Northup, I think it was him, he did a great video reviewing the Canon 70D versus the Nikon 7100, and he said the HDR in the Nikon humped this. So that's something to be aware of, like, okay, if you're doing HDR, Nikon seems to be kicking ass in that a bit more. 2 memory cards, that's awesome, and if it's in the same type of body, like the Canon 7D body was fantastic. It's got more 65-point wide area autofocus. That's brilliant. And yeah, so it's saying like 10 frames a second, super good fast action sport. I think it's pretty much the same sensor which is in the 70D, but what you're getting is the the 7D body. So I'm kind of thinking at the moment, it's like, yeah, that's kind of more what I'm going for at the moment. The other thing about the Nikon D7100 is that the video function is good. It gives you good quality video. However, if you want to change the aperture, you have to come out of the video, go into the menu settings, change the aperture, then go back into the video. Pain in the ass. And it doesn't show you a live change of exposure when you're changing these in the actual video. The Canon does. So the Canon video quality may not be better, but the actual the ability to use it is a lot easier and quicker and more understandable to use. And again, with the 7D Mark II, is that I can use Sigma, I can use Tamron, I can use all these other lenses. So it's like, cool, it's already got a proper ecosystem which is easy to understand. It can use full frame lenses, it can use EFS lenses and just EF lenses. So there's not a difficulty in finding the type of lens which you want. So the Canon 7D Mark II is really looking good. I want to see how the quality goes for stuff like dynamic range. The other thing is Mori, I think it's called, which is where you get that funny pattern in your videos, which you may have seen in my last video. The pattern on my actual futon beside me, it was like a weird kind of like hypnotic thing going on. So that's something to, if it's got a low pass filter or a optical low pass filter, usually gets rid of that, or the anti-aliasing filter. If it has that, that usually helps get rid of that. One last thing is that if you are on my photography channel, you may not know that I've got two other channels. One is my exercise channel, which you can check out, which is Dom Bauer Exercise. I think the actual name is just youtube.com/Dom Bauer. And I've also got another one on this channel, so I've got Dom's Talks. And a lot of that is going to be about, well, me dealing with my first ever newborn baby, little Logan Bauer, born on the 4th of September, and so I'm learning to be a dad. So it's all my mistakes and all the things which I'm learning which are quite useful. So if you want to see more about little Logan and how he's getting on, check out Dom's Talks. And if you want to see, I've also got Dom's Flights as well. So again, I'm doing a lot of stuff flying my DJI Phantom around the places, and also going through the process of getting the license to do it commercially. So if you want to see how I'm doing that, check out the Dom's Flights channel as well, which I'll put all the links to down below. So thanks for watching, bye bye. It also just annoys me that if I'm staying with Nikon and somebody's saying, oh well, the Nikon D610 isn't a professional camera, you're like, this is a camera which is costing over £2,000. It's 24 million pixels, has 6.5 frames a second. It's got amazing pro quality features. But if you go to the Nikon NPS, Nikon Professional Services, and you go, okay, what does Nikon even consider professional cameras? Okay, D4, D4S, fine, D3, all that kind of stuff. It's still got the D300, a crop sensor 12 megapixel little camera, which is under £1,000. I think you get it for $999 with a lens these days. And not even this, it's just a D300. So that was a camera which I had as well, which I thought was brilliant. Solid body, good controls, everything felt fantastic. Same with the Nikon D700. But there's no D600, no D610, no D750. They're like, dudes, if somebody someone said, oh, it's an enthusiast camera. An enthusiast camera costing over £2,000 and having features which are actually greater than what the Nikon D3X had. You're like, that would really suck if you're spending that much money and yet you can't get into the Nikon Professional Services because your camera's not professional enough. That's a bit of an odd one. And what I would say is that there really were some game changers in the world of photography. Certainly in the world of digital photography in the more recent years. So whenever, there's just simple cameras coming out for a while, but then whenever the Nikon D3 came out, everyone was like, the ISO performance on that is mind-blowing. That was a game changer at its time. Then the D700 came out, so I said the D3, D700, together, they were game changers. Nikon then brought out the D90, which had HD video. It was the first digital SLR ever to have HD video. Nobody paid attention. It was only 720 and 30 frames a second. Everyone's like, yeah, whatever. Whenever the Canon 7D came out and the 5D Mark II, again, those two together, I would say those were game changers again. The 5D Mark III's come out, nobody's really that fast. It's like, yeah, it's cool. But the game changers that made people go, I'm going to Canon, were really these two cameras, which really brought amazing build quality and video functionality to it. Since then, in terms of game changers, like the Nikon DF, that's not a game changer, nobody's that fast. In terms of Canon, it's brought loads of other little cameras. I'd say probably the other game changer was the Magic Lantern for video in the Canon system. So the 550D and 550D and upwards, you could install Magic Lantern, so you got amazing video functionalities in very simple or very cheap cameras. So that was another, I would say, game changer. Then after that, the next game changer I'd really say was the GoPro. Everyone, if you ask anyone, do you know a camera, they'll say the GoPro. If you ask anyone, do you know the Leica M9, they'll be going, what the hell are you on about? If you ask them, oh, what do you think of the Canon 650D, they'll be going, what is it? If you say, what's a GoPro, everyone's like, I know what that is. If you say more to the photography people, what's a Nikon D3 or what's a Nikon D700, more people are going to go, oh yeah, I heard that's a really important camera. You see the Canon 5D Mark II, so many people were just like, oh, I've just bought a camera. I hear there's another one called the 5D Mark II. Is that good? It's another game changer. So after the GoPro, I'd say there's not really been much of a game changer since then, but possibly I'd say the DJI Phantom has probably been the next game changer again. So although it's not a camera, it's an ability to get photos or video as well. So game changers in the photography, in the digital photography world, aren't just digital SLRs anymore. And the Micro Four Thirds has done pretty well, and like the Panasonic G4, GH4, whatever, everyone's like, oh, 4K video, that's pretty awesome. And I think that's a side game changer. I think some people who are interested in it are getting into it, but again, for the majority of people, they wouldn't really have heard of that. But I would say the fact that this new Canon 7D Mark II has come out with fantastic abilities, that's actually looking like more like I'm a photographer that's going from full frame down to crop sensor camera. And I'm not really seeing a loss here. I'm seeing faster frames a second. Maybe the ISO won't be quite as good, but I'm seeing faster and more accurate autofocus, a wider array of focus buttons, focus points on the actual screen, and dual memory cards. Okay, you can get that in other cameras, but I don't have that in my Nikon D700 at the moment. But yeah, it's I would say bad move Nikon if you just put like the D610 sensor into a good body like the D810. I would be going, I'm saving some money and going and investing in that. But at the moment, you've put the same sensor in a slightly different body. I'm not fussed about it. I'm not going, oh, this is an amazing thing. I'm just going, it's just another camera that's popped out that nobody really cares about. But with Canon, I'm now, you're losing business if people are kind of going, oh, not fussed, I'm going to another brand. Better to have people buying more kit in your own company than going, I'm not fussed anymore. So I'm now really actively looking at all my camera gear and just thinking, I can get adapters, so I don't need to buy new lenses, or I could sell a couple of lenses and buy all the new kit and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, still got to see how the actual the tests of these cameras come out. Because I always think, don't be a fool and buy a camera before any of the kind of image tests have been done or anything like that. Especially, like, look at the Nikon D600. Whenever that came out, so many issues with it, and that's why they suddenly, like, within 6 months, brought out the 610, just kind of going, oh, oil spots, oh, fucked up, flappy thing, what do you call it, shutter, all that kind of stuff. So I would always say, hold off 6 months until it's been out and that most of the kinks have been ironed out. Or the Nikon D810 has got some sort of thermal problem that the sensor gets too hot now. You're like, oh, come on, Nikon. So many quality control problems which are really obvious that everyone's hearing about. Not just a case of somebody going, oh, my battery didn't work. It's like hundreds of people all over forums saying there's problems going on all the time. So for me, it's actually the other brands which are really the more exciting and interesting. Canon 7D Mark II, oh, sounds good. Sony A7 series kind of stuff. Oh, that's a very, very good potential, and that would be potential buy two cameras. So A7R and A7S, cool. That may be about $4,000, but then I've got my super ISO for like indoor churches, and then I've got my super resolution for outdoors and portraits and stuff like that. So but the thing with Sony is the lens issue is just such a nightmare. So yeah, I would just say everyone just keep your eyes peeled on what Canon is doing. If you're a Nikon shooter, have a little look at what Canon is doing at the moment. I'd definitely say check out Tony Northrup. He did a good, that was his live. I was watching him the other night. Very good information on the preview coming out, but also just the review. Look at the video which he did of the 70D, the Canon 70D versus the Nikon D7100, and you'll see some good examples of both ISO, color changes. Oh, there was another guy, the cameraman, hold on. No, Michael, the mentor, he did a fantastic, seriously in-depth review of kind of a shootout between the 70D and the 7100. Why can't I just remember it's 7,100? Too many numbers. Right, video finishing.